One and all, as we celebrate the magic of women in cinema at our Film Coven. We're your hosts, Kelli Mehan
and Melissa Woody, and today we are inducting the female cast of the 1996 movie The Craft.
Melissa, how do you enter this episode of Film Coven?
With perfect love and perfect trust. How about you?
With perfect love and perfect trust. This was so much fun to revisit. When we were doing our brainstorm about how we wanted to schedule the year, I'm like, for our first Halloween episode, it has to be The Craft. It just has to be. It's one of those 90s staples. It's one of those sleepover movies. If you never even watched it at the time, like you saw this cover down at the video store, very teenage girl, witchy magic. I love it. How do you find The Craft?
Oh, I love this. I will say I kind of came to it later in life. I probably saw it maybe once when I was like 17-ish, but I didn't see it until a few years ago. So I felt like I was rediscovering it because I only saw it the one time, like when I was a teenager. For some reason, it was not one that was on repeat, which is weird because this has a lot of things that I love. But no, this was a lot of fun revisiting. It is just that perfect like fall time movie, and I mean witches, yes please. Like I love anything related to that kind of thing.
This is one I remember renting from the video stores so many times with my friend group, like, and this and Hocus Pocus, but not actually probably getting to it as much. Like we would definitely typically go for a Hocus Pocus, or I remember like Batman Returns, I think, being on a lot, like that, and being more the gothic style. So coming to this one, similar to you, like more as an adult, but still living for the teenage vibes of it, because I love anything really 90s based is like my joy spot. It's really funny how much, even though we did our teen years mid-2000s, late 2000s, I still relate so much to what these girls go through and a lot of the words, and maybe it has something to do with like, because there's still no technology as much, so that still felt a little bit more similar. Like we had the start of MSN Messenger and that sort of thing, so still being able to relate to going out and hanging out with your friends in the park and just not being in constant contact with each other, or rumors spread around the school like the old-fashioned way. So there's still a lot of teenageisms that I love about this film, and the female friendship that these girls formed also feels really true to life for me. I think I'm going to say true to the teenage experience so much in this film, because it's sometimes finding your friends out of necessity, feeling those bonds, questioning those bonds, because this isn't the Babysitters Club, which tends to be my go-to of like, we're best friends. Like, it's not that at all. And I kind of love that, because it really did feel like what it was like to be a teenage girl in your 16, 17 years, feeling awkward with your friend group, transitioning with your friend group, finding your place in a school, all those sorts of things. How do you find our leading ladies? We'll start with Sarah. What do you think about Sarah?
Yeah, so Sarah is kind of our main protagonist, and she is the new girl in school. It's this Catholic school in California. I think it's LA is like the area that they're in. And yeah, and I think very quickly we kind of realize that she might be a natural witch. It kind of verbally says that later, but like there's just tendencies that kind of happen early on in the film that it's like something's up with her. She kind of is that mysterious new girl that the other girls are interested in knowing more.
Absolutely. It's nice to get like a new character of the school, because then we're seeing everything new from her perspective. So when she's introduced to Nancy, Bonnie, and Rochelle, who are already close friends, and she's introduced to Chris, and like finding it when you talk to people, like stay away from them, no, stay away from them. I like that point of view, because it's like, who do you trust? And you feel yourself in Sarah's shoes. Tell us about Nancy.
Oh yes, so Nancy is the head witch of this coven that we'll talk about later. But she's kind of the head of the three girls that are eventually gonna become friends with Sarah, and she is what you would think as like the goth queen of a high school.
Yes.
Like just the aesthetic of it all with the dark lips, dark eyes, like eyeshadow, the chains, things that she's got going on. Yeah, no, she's very like outspoken, and she comes off fairly aggressive, kind of right off the bat. But I love her for it.
We throw this word around a lot of the point, but she's just an iconic female character at this point. I think even if she makes a lot of best of lists for like especially female villains or characters of the 90s, because there's just something really, as you sort of said, that she's aggressive but then she's soft at times, and it all comes down to Faruja Balk, and the way she plays her is just fantastic. And being able to go through a lot of different phases with the character, I really like as well. How do you find who's maybe like a bit of our sidekick characters, Bonnie and Rochelle?
I think they're great. You know, they don't get maybe as much screen time or like development compared to Sarah and Nancy, but Bonnie, played by Neve Campbell, it's really interesting to know that like Scream came out the same year as this. But she's kind of more of the awkward, shy one of the group. That's kind of she kind of pay attention. She's somebody like a wallflower, I guess is the word I'm looking for. She kind of like stays to the side and kind of pays attention to things, but she's a little bit more to herself. And then Rochelle is really well put together, and she kind of goes with the flow with the group. And I think that has to do with her element of water, which each girl represents a different element in nature. And but I like her presence with the four girls.
What's so great about the four girls is, like, as you're sort of alluding to, each really has their own presence, each has their own personality type and archetype that they're playing up to, and it suits the Coven style because they're making a circle. It's really funny. It's a circle where they're called the corners at the same time, but like each one really does represent their element that they're bestowed upon, their spirit animals. I like that. It's a lot about finding yourself, finding your voice, finding out who you are, self-discovery. Really, those are the underlying themes. That and karma is what really comes through in the movie. Yeah. Let's start off with our magical moments. Describe for us Sarah starting at this new school and how she meets everyone.
Yeah, so she, you know, it's a Catholic school, so everyone's in uniforms, and if I'm remembering right, I think she kind of shows up the first day not in uniform, or like not in like at least the traditional sense of a uniform. So she definitely already kind of physically looks kind of not like everyone else, the way that she's dressing. I believe it's French class. Yes. She's spinning her pencil, and that definitely catches Bonnie's eye, like, oh, okay, she might be one of us, or like we should have her join our group, because that seems like a witch thing to do, to spin your pencil around.
Yeah, and also Bonnie's like reading in her almanac. She's like, something new's coming today. So she, as you sort of said, she's really observant. She's on the hunt for someone new, and comes across Sarah. We also see the introduction of Skeet Ulrich's Chris and Breckin Meyer and as the Cronies. And I can't believe the through line that we're getting with some of our episodes. The fact that like this is our second episode to feature Breckin Meyer in a great plot, in a great side character plot. But also, as you sort of alluded to, this is when we get Scream as well. So we get Neve Campbell and Skeet Ulrich again. How do you find these characters and this scene of them sort of her and Chris sort of really meeting?
That was like at the lunch table. Is that when they really meet? Okay, because I think he like notices her in class, but they don't really like interact. I think he's just like, ooh, she's cute and new type of thing. But yeah, so she's sitting alone at lunch, and Chris approaches her, and he's kind of like giving her the rundown of the school, and slightly hitting on her too, like as well, because of course. But I feel like an important thing to remember is like he is the first person that kind of really outreaches to her. She's like, okay, like at least he's kind of making me feel welcomed in this new school, because like that's definitely a very vulnerable and difficult situation to go through, is starting at a new school, or just being the new person either at school or a new job or whatever. It's definitely tough to like navigate kind of all the social aspects of that. Absolutely.
She even asks, she says, these three girls have been staring at me like, don't look, those ones there. And he's like, oh, the bitches of Eastwick. And I'm like, yes, that is meant to be like a slur, but I think that's an amazing name. Like I would love to be called that. So as you sort of said, like then he's giving her the layout, like stay away from them. And why wouldn't you trust someone? And especially if they've been a bit creepy to you. And she even goes to then reach out to them in science lab and join up. And as you sort of noted, Nancy's quite aggressive, quite standoffish, and doesn't want anyone new in her circle. We find with Nancy throughout the whole film, she really does love being the center of control. She loves being the power. She loves being the one with all the answers, probably because she's not getting that from home. So that's really what she's seeking, is power and control throughout the whole film. And we see her start to assert that even a little bit by not letting Sarah join in straight away and waiting until they get to have a bit of a better talk. And then as that happens at the lockers, she notices them with Chris, and she's like, he's a jerk. He hits on everything, like stay away. So I do like that already from the start of the film. You've got like conflicting stories, and who do you believe? And if you're in Sarah's shoes, what do you sort of do? So I find that interesting. Our next magical moment would be when they actually do get to hang out. So how do you find the scenes where they go to the witch's shop and then run away and run away from the guy in the streets and hang out in the park? How do you find that whole moment?
Yeah, I love the magic shop. Like it's just cool. Like I mean, I'm not a witch or anything, but like I like the aesthetic of it all, and like it's just, and I like the lady who works there. I feel like she has like a very like kind presence, and it very much feels like a bookstore almost, because it does have a lot of different books, and I just like a good bookstore. Like I like this. I feel like I can smell it. Like I don't know. Like it has a good smell and a good vibe, I feel like.
I find the same of like, it gives me very Buffy charm, like anything really witchy, magic-y shop. I live for that sort of thing. And I do like this lady dressed in white, really calm presence, trying to guide Sarah already. She can pick up like, you're wearing your mother's ring, you might be a bit of a natural witch, trying to put her in the right direction. Read your books, learn your candles. What you put out in the universe comes back to you ×3, like really trying to impart a bit of that wisdom already. And you already see the other girls not respecting that because they're going in to steal, you know, they won't pay for it, whereas Sarah does pay for her. So you're getting that difference in the three who have already been there and Sarah already. So I find that interesting. Then we get that part where they walking the streets. It's a bit of a rough cut, actually. When I was watching the film, I'm like, oh, wow, it's like, it's nighttime and we're in the streets of LA, and it's like, just look ahead and don't look forward. And this guy is chasing Sarah with a snake. Did not pick up on this at all from the teenage watch, but of course, this is him a little bit alluding to that Nancy's, you know, that maybe you shouldn't trust people, that there's something, I've had a dream about you, this guy reaching out to her. But how do you find this car chase scene?
Yeah, like, so at the very beginning of the film, we do see him at the house for like a moment. He just like shows up and has a snake, and like Sarah's dad's like, get out of here. And then that's kind of it with that guy. But then we see him again in this scene, and it's kind of the same vibe where it seems like he's trying to provide a warning to Sarah, but like I feel like he's not really communicating it in a great way. And obviously, like if I was a young teenage girl and this guy is like coming off the street with a snake and like trying to talk to me, I'd probably want to go the other way. Like so it's definitely like creepy, and snakes are definitely used a lot through this movie, and I think snakes definitely like symbolize, like I feel like stuff with trust, like you're a snake, you know, somebody you can't really trust. So I feel like you're saying, I think it's definitely a warning of like, don't trust these girls, particularly Nancy.
Then what happens is that Sarah runs across the street and the man runs into the middle of the street, and she's looking at him, and you can see a bit of that natural magic coming through where she doesn't want to be chased anymore. So incidentally, he's hit by a car. And the girls all run off to their safe space in the park, where, I mean, like, if you weren't dying in the middle of a park from like too much alcohol in the mid-2000s, like, were you even a teenager? Like, that's how I feel. Everyone had like that space that they would go to. And the girls talk about how, you know, they made that happen, and how they start to explain the power of Manon. Melissa, how do you find this concept of Manon?
I think it's fine.
They say it different every time. Sorry, I'm going to say this. Manon, Manu, Mana. Everyone says it differently.
No, that's completely fine. I think it's fine. We don't like it's something that it's basically this deity that they're kind of worshiping, and a lot of their spells is like calling to him. That's like to the extent of what we kind of get from the movie. They don't really like expand a whole lot on like who this being is, or like what it really does. It's more of like a concept. So yeah, it's more just like a god or a deity that they are all kind of worshiping. So I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that it's a guy, but it's all good.
I really honed in on that as well, because they sort of talk about how it's your connection to nature. They said, because Sarah Flatter asked, like, are you guys worshipping the devil or something? And they're like, no, if God and the devil were to fight each other, Manon would be the football field that they play on, which is just an odd concept, but I kind of like it. But yes, some of the phrasing, I wish they maybe either made it female or they made it genderless, because then there's a lot of like, Manon, you take him into you and like, I'm just such a child, like I'm getting that every time. Like, how do you not have a little bit of a dirty connotation to that? But it's interesting that, you know, we're getting these concepts of where the power is coming from, and a lot of that nature connection. And we see the girls do start to create their covens. So they skip a day of school, they go on the bus. One of my absolute most favorite lines from anything is like, watch out for weirdos, mister, we are the weirdos. Love that. And they tell us about how they form their coven.
Yeah, they're in this park, it's daylight, and they're drinking each other's blood at the beginning. So yeah, they're kind of all going around drinking each other's blood, and they're kind of saying different incantations, and each of them basically highlight something in their life that they would like fixed, essentially. So for Sarah, she wants to be loved basically, and does like a love spell specifically on Chris, because at this point I think they had already gone on their date. Did that already happen?
Oh yes, they've gone on their date, and she turns him down to go back to his place. So he spreads a rumor around the whole school that they slept together, and she was the lousiest lay he ever had. And I was like, well, that's so rough. And Nancy says, told you he said the same thing about me.
So that's kind of been established. So she kind of wants to get back at him at this point and put a love spell on him, which, I mean, I feel like from the witch things I've like read and seen, it seems like a love spell is never a good idea. It always goes bad. Ever worked?
Give us an example in the comments when that has ever worked.
Yeah, like, so it's like, okay, I see where this is going. It's gonna be bad. And then Rochelle's been dealing with a bully, specifically due to her race, and so she wants to be respected by her peers, and she wants to get some payback to her bully, which, all for it. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And then Bonnie has burns on her back, and she basically wishes to be beautiful inside and out, which I think is just hilarious, because I'm just like, Neve Campbell is a beautiful woman.
At one point she refers to herself, I used to look like a monster, and I'm like, oh no, she's stunning.
Yeah, so that one's like a little like, okay, like I don't really believe it that much, but of course, like I wouldn't want burns on my back either, so like
and
I get that part.
In the sense of being a teenage girl and feeling different, so I can see the insecurity, and I think that's the part Neve Campbell plays real well, is how insecure she feels as Bonnie.
Yeah, and like, I definitely think it's tapping into like body image issues, just specifically with the burns that she has. And then lastly, Nancy basically just wants all the power and control, essentially. like I don't remember exactly how she defines it, but it's basically like, I want Manon in me, and I want it now.
I think that's pretty much it. I want all the power of Manon. Like, take, yeah. And we do see most of the girls sort of do wish for double things, as you sort of said. The power for me to love myself and to be loved by others, the power for others to respect me and to forgive those who don't, and Bonnie inside and out. So it really is quite blatant when Nancy says, give me everything. I want it all. Phenomenal cosmic powers, basically, what she's asking for.
Yeah.
And we see that the magic spells start working. We see that Chris starts following Sarah around everywhere, carrying her books, being a bit of a puppy after her in a sense. We see that Rochelle's bully, played by Christine Taylor, cannot remember the name because we just say Marsha Brady, Marsha, who has been saying horrific things to her in the movie. Like, really took me aback when I was watching the film. I was like, wow, that's woof. So we see that her hair starts to fall out. Because early in the film, the bully was making fun of Rochelle's hair. So that bit of comeuppance, that bit of karma. We see Bonnie undergoing scar treatment and her scars start fading away. So she gets a full personality change almost. She was very quiet and, as you said, wallflower and withdrawn. She rocks up to school like in her Catholic schoolgirl uniform, and I'm feeling it. She's looking great. It's nice to see that self-confidence start coming out of her, and she really is starting to feel herself and feel beautiful. But Nancy gets nothing at this point in time, and it's really fascinating to see the group dynamic shift because Rochelle and Bonnie are, Sarah, you're making this happen. Sarah, look how great this is. Look how everything's been happening since you've been here. And you can see that Nancy's starting to get jealous. You can see that Nancy is bothered because not only is she losing control of her friends, which I'm sure she really covets, nothing has happened for her as well. So again, she's missing out. And we see that she has this horrible home life. At one point, I think the girls say, I think she wished to not be white trash. That's the phrasing that they choose to use. So we see that she's being abused and her mother's being abused by a stepfather in the house. And at one point in time, can you describe it for me, Melissa? Because you described it much better than I did.
Yeah, what I had in my notes was pretty funny. But basically what happens is she yells stop, like really loud, like a screeching scream, and basically, and you can tell, I think it's like a trailer that they're living in. It's like, or it's a very small like kind of area that they're living in, and like you can see the kitchen right behind her, and everything kind of goes on fire. And then like moments later, the stepfather has a heart attack, and then they're on their way to the hospital, and Nancy kind of has like a bit of a grin on her face. Like she is feeling excited by all this, that she thinks she's done this, basically. Yeah.
That is the main point. She feels like she has done that. And for me, this is where we start to see the first part of the turn, because there's a more blatant part later on that really comes out than when we see Nancy in her villain arc. But willfully causing harm to other people is where we start seeing this shift in them all. So they have Nancy starts coming into a lot of money. I love this moment of her and the mum in the penthouse, because the mum, all she wanted was a jukebox that plays Connie Francis, and it gives me I'm not a regular mum, I'm a cool mum. Like, I'd be so interested if Tina Fey had any sort of inspiration from that, because it's almost like pinpointed exactly the way it is. But I like that. The girls hang out a bit, and it's nice to see just teenage girls just being young and being friends, because so far everything's been quite heavy. When we started talking about the film, you sort of said to me like, wow, that was a lot darker than I remember it. And I said, same, because when I think about it, I sort of do think about more like those teenage girl moments, just hanging out at a summer party, throwing food at each other, playing light as a feather, stiff as a board. Melissa, does this remind you of any of your teenage experience?
Oh yeah, we definitely did light as a feather, stiff as a board. We definitely did that kind of stuff. We, tried to say scary stories to each other. Again, somebody who like loves horror, I would probably lean into it a little bit more than others. But I would try to like reel it in, because I'm like, oh, not all my friends like the spooky things. But yeah, no, absolutely. Just hanging out, talking, watching television, chit-chatting, that type of thing. Absolutely. Just exploring the town,
Yeah, there's part of me when I'm watching this that like feels really nostalgic for that. Like it's been a little while. I miss when it's really hard when you find a lot of these girls trying to find out who they are, trying to find a way in the world, because at this point in your life you feel like you have very little control, very little agency of what's happening in your life. But then on the other hand, you don't realize sometimes you also have this freedom to just be young, not freedom to spend time with your friends, freedom to just hang out, differences to when you're an adult and you maybe sometimes it takes 6 weeks to schedule time with your friends at this point because everyone has busy lives and busy schedules. So yeah. I was yearning a little bit for moments like this. I do miss that sort of thing. The next thing we sort of see is that after Nancy's magic spell, where she thinks she's killed her stepfather, everyone's magic starts to become a little bit too much. So we see Chris becoming quite obsessive with Sarah. We see Rochelle's bully. All her hair has fallen out at this point and she's crying in the shower. And that just looks so nasty, like the wounds in her head where this hair's pulling out. We see Bonnie really becoming quite conceited, quite narcissistic. And then we get this scene of them on the beach with the invocation of Mano. Melissa, tell us about this beach scene.
Oh yeah, so they're all in their circle and they're chanting, and it's, you know, of course it's nighttime and there's thunder and lightning and it's really dramatic. And then I love that Nancy, she gets like electrocuted by lightning, and it's like, you know, it's a little cheesy in regards to some of the effects, but like I'm still here for it. But like hard cut, we're in the morning now and Nancy's walking on water, so that's a vibe. And then there's like all these beached sharks on the beach that are kind of appearing, and it's like, okay, what's going on? It seems like you were saying before, I mean, it seems like there's definitely an imbalance, and the power of all of it is definitely getting to them all. Besides maybe Sarah, she's definitely the one that's like recognizing it and going, hey guys, like maybe we should chill out. Like, but they're doubling down on it, especially Nancy.
Well, they're all getting what they want. They're getting what they want. They're feeling the power. This is what, not only getting what they want in their life, but getting to feel like the magic is real, which is what they've been really wanting for a long time. Whereas Sarah describes earlier, like anytime she's using magic, it usually goes wrong. So she's been trying to suppress her powers where the others have been trying to gain it. And I was watching the movie and I found that really true to life as well. Some people are just really naturally talented, naturally gifted, like Sarah. And then you have people like Nancy who could study the hardest, could want it the hardest, and just it's not as fruitful. And that's just a real life lesson. It's an unfortunate life truth. So for Nancy to now feel like she's the chosen one, that she's surpassing Sarah's powers, she got what she wanted, where she feels all the powers of Manon. I love how you say she looks struck by lightning, because she's fried. That hair is fried. The eyes are wide. Like, she looks wild, and it's just great. And this is the turn. This is the villain turn. This is Nancy in her villain era, and I'm loving it. Okay. We get some more darker moments from here on, because as you sort of said, Sarah's really recognizing like this is going too far, but it's not far enough. Melissa, what happens next?
Like we said before, Chris is just a puppy dog, and like it's increasing the kind of obsession of Sarah for him. And we have a scene where Chris assaults her, and again, I don't really remember the scene, which is like crazy, because obviously I feel like I should. It's very alarming, but like rewatching it, it was like, oh wow, this is a lot like darker than I remember, and it's upsetting. Absolutely, like, you know, that's never okay. And again, it's proving the point of like, we've crossed the line, things are going way too far. We need to undo what we've done at this point, or figure out how can we have everyone chill out, because yeah, everything's just been taken too far.
Yeah, and how disheveled she looks when she shows up at Rochelle's house. Like, as you said, it's really upsetting. And the girls find it really upsetting as well, especially Nancy, who had warned Sarah about Chris and who had previous relations with Chris. We see this real wild look turn in her eyes. She hunts off to go find him and make him pay. How do you find this scene in terms of intention, in terms of character intention? Because I think it's a bit confusing.
Yeah, it is confusing when you like really start thinking about it. Basically what happens is Nancy goes to this party that like everyone's at, including Chris, and she puts on the glamour to appear like Sarah, and basically seduces him, and they hook up, which again is not okay, because I would argue that's like, it is assault, because you don't know who you're actually encountering right now. So it's, you know, no consent's happening there. Yeah, she's hungry for power, and so it seems like Sarah and Nancy have kind of been butting heads a little bit in that sense, because Nancy wants the ultimate power. So it does seem a little bit confusing that she would try to almost help her friend in this way, or like that's like her intention. It seems like, is like, oh, I want to get back at him for him doing that to you. But like at this point with Nancy's character, you would think she wouldn't really care, like in a way. So yeah, I find it confusing in that sense.
I think she's full of power. I think she's full of anger. And so this person that has not only hurt her, but now hurt her friend, she goes for that. But then I think there's a bit of a twist, Melissa, because she does try to seduce him and he rejects her. And I think she's sick of being rejected. And I think she's sick of Sarah being wanted more than her. So I think that's why she turns into Sarah. So I think there's some weird dichotomy there. And we see that happen when Sarah busts in and she turns back to herself. And, you know, Chris is not okay with it, of course. But again, that's that feeling of, oh, look, this is the person you really wanted here. Why don't you want me? And she flips out as well. And she talks about like how he treats women. You treat them like whores. And you see, oh, this awesome shot. This such great shot of Rouge Bourque coming straight at the camera. You see her toes. She's levitating and her tippy toes are dragging across the floor. And you see the wind come up behind her and all the powers of nature. And she's become this force. This lightning has almost imbued her as this natural disaster force coming at him. And he gets pushed out the window and dies. And Sarah is freaked by it. Like, this is so not okay. Whereas the other girls are a bit more like, well, he was a jerk. He got what was coming to him. And that's interesting as well. Like, really, you start to see how different and how changed those girls have become.
Yeah, they definitely feel indifferent to all these things when it seems like the morals are definitely getting a little gray for them, for sure, because of all the power, and they're getting what they want, like you were saying earlier. Yeah, and yeah, I will say, you know, difficult topics for sure, but I will say I do like this insano mode that Nancy goes on from like this point until like the end of the film. It's just a fun like acting kind of thing to watch, because yeah, she's definitely becomes really unhinged, but it's very entertaining to watch.
And we talked at the start like about it being iconic, and you do think of more of these moments, because I just wrote in my notes like Nancy goes nuts. That's how I feel. Like unhinged is a much nicer word for it. But she she's feeling unstoppable, unbeatable, control, power, everything she could have wanted. So Sarah knows that this is an imbalance in nature, knows that this is going to come back to them, wants to leave the coven, and they just flat out blatantly threaten her. When she's crying in the toilet stall, oh, that's rough. That's so rough to see, but you don't feel safe anywhere. They're haunting her in her dreams, and they get so bitchy. They get so nasty and pointed with what you're saying, especially characters like Bonnie, who was really sweet and nice and welcoming at the start. Like, how have you been sleeping, Sarah? Like, really needling in on those sorts of things. I find that so interesting. Very the teenage experience. How did you find this lead up to the end scene and the big, because it's a good like 20-minute ending climactic fight scene. I didn't realize it was so in depth.
Yeah, so another through line I feel like with this movie, it is the Josie the Pussycats when she gets the mind control. I felt very similar kind of watching this, that like you're saying, it's, you know, the girls' personalities have really changed or intensified. Maybe like that side of their personality has just like taken over. And yeah, I think, I mean, teenage girls are rough. They are nasty, or they can be, you know, not all, but like, it is that age where people can be very vindictive in high school, and just, yeah, and like very insidious. I don't know. So it feels very real to like the teenage experience, but it still was like, it was rough to watch. Again, I didn't realize how dark they kind of go. So something that we didn't talk about at the beginning of the movie is Sarah did attempt suicide, and I think that was part of the move. They don't they don't fully, like, I feel like, explain that, but I think it's implied enough that she self-harmed herself. And at this point of the film, the girls are using that against her, and like also like threatening to like basically to tell her to kill herself. And it's intense. And again, I just don't remember it being this dark, but at the same time, it feels there's like this authenticity about it as well. Like it feels real to the teenage experience in a way.
Oh, I extremely related to it. I extremely related to a lot of the words and all of the phrasing that was used. So, yeah, just we are trying to use discretion when we're talking about some of these topics, because I know for me, like, was a little bit confronting at times as well. But this ending fight scene, as you sort of mentioned, the girls rock up. They fake the father and the stepmother's death, don't they? So they're really trying to isolate Sarah, and yeah, it's really goes to the nth degree at the end. So we've talked about how sort of maybe realistic it is at times. I think this is like your big overblown third act finale. It's cheesy, it's corny, but it's still like entertaining to watch and makes sense in the how everything needs to come back threefold. It's almost like everything has been amped up threefold, where like they're just straight out wanting to murder her or have her commit suicide at this point. So they make Sarah think she's alone. They use bugs and snakes, which Sarah has mentioned was part of her nightmare. She has hallucinations a lot. Part of being a natural witch is that she would wake up and not know that she was still dreaming, not know that things were still real. So making her house a haunted house, having the girls there and flying at her. But Sarah starts to get a bit of her own power. She calls on her mother, she calls on her corner of the north, and is trying to show these girls the error of their ways. So we start with Bonnie and Rochelle. There's this scene in the mirror where Rochelle's hair starts to fall out and Bonnie's scars start to come back. So they run off, and it's this showdown between Nancy and Sarah. Melissa, tell us about this final standoff almost. It's very like cowboy-esque. It's white hats, black hats, very that.
Yeah, like you said, it's a fairly long scene. Honestly, it's probably one of my criticisms is like it goes on probably a little too long. Yeah. But at the same time, like it is a good time because I feel like it does have a good mix of practical effects and like animation. Again, some of the animation doesn't age extremely well. It kind of gives me the Faculty vibes a little bit, in the sense of like they also had a mix of like practical and animated, and it's like some of it works really well and some of it kind of doesn't. But a particular kind of scene that I really like is it looks like they're like on the wall, but like they must have like made the room go sideways or something and like filmed it sideways or something, but it looks so cool. And they use a lot of practical effects with like the dresser and like all this like stuff in Sarah's house kind of like going at her, and like it's pretty intense because you're like, okay, how is she gonna get out of this? Like it looks like she's getting trampled to death by all these different like objects kind of flying at her, which kind of reminded me of a scene from The Exorcist actually. But then like it kind of goes to this point where Nancy's trying to find her, and it's just like her uniform. And it's like, what? And then she kind of appears and then kicks her away.
This scene reminds me of something, and I cannot put my finger on it. It's really bugging me, where someone comes out the side and like kicks someone in the chest to kill them off. That's going to come to me like a week later, but I was watching that. I was like, oh, that's really...
I mean, is it House?
It might be. Oh my goodness, it actually might be. It might be Kung Fu. Yes! Please edit in the Kung Fu sound effects right here. Thank you. Yes. Actually, that probably is what it is. Nancy is defeated because Sarah gets the one up on her and binds her. I bind you, Nancy, from doing harm to others and harm to yourself. So essentially taking away all the powers. Nancy's defeated, the girls lose their powers. So we get this ending karma scene where, you know, Sarah's, are they packing up to leave again?
Yeah, it does seem a little bit confusing because, like, didn't you guys just move here? I was kind of
the house is trash now, so
yeah, maybe they need to like live at another place for a while they're remodeling. I don't really know.
But we see Bonnie and Rochelle come up and check in on Sarah, and it looks really like they've seen the error of their ways and they want to be friends again. But obviously, you know, again, to the experience, like sometimes the damage is done and you just can't recover from that. You can be civil with one another, but you might just not be friends again. And that's just part of life. We see the girls walk away, make the snarkiest comment about, well, she probably doesn't have her powers anyway. And Sarah just flips on them and like makes trees fall and makes the wind call. So we know that Sarah's still keeping her powers, but the girls don't have any. And that's really what they've come to sort of sniff out. And I find that really interesting as well, that the girls are like, well, do you still have your powers? Because, you know, we don't, that sort of thing. And we see Nancy. This is such a rough ending. She's done horrific things, but I really feel for her in this moment where she's just in this, she's been put in a psychiatric facility in a straitjacket being medicated. Melissa, give us this ending scene.
Yeah, I will say I find like it's upsetting in the sense of like, you know, we know that her home life isn't great. You know, she's now just living with her mom. And I do believe they kind of, again, we don't see too much of it, but I think her mom is like a drunk or has issues with like substance abuse. And so regardless that the stepfather's gone, like her home life is still fairly imbalanced, I would say. And then obviously like losing her powers, it's like she doesn't have, I think, much purpose, or at least that's what her belief is. And so it's upsetting in the sense of like, that's never a good place to be in, to like not have a lot of purpose or like not be in a good place mentally. But the unfortunate part for me is like, I do find this scene a little cheesy, and it really gave me Batman Forever vibes. Yes! Where it's like, I am Batman or whatever. And like, she just kind of keeps saying like, I'm flying. It's kind of what she keeps like repeating. And again, I think sometimes rewatching films, I don't even know really, like maybe even like pre-2010 even, like some of the mental health stuff is like a bit rough because it's not really, I feel like, realistic, and it's a little
it's not considerate. It's not considerate of the person.
Yeah. But it's like it still fairly works for me, just because I mean it is a movie at the end of the day, and it is fairly entertaining. But yeah, it's just I do find it a bit corny at the end of the day, like her psychiatric scene. How did you feel about the ending?
Same. When you said Batman Forever, that checks me out. That's very on the nose. But I thought the same. Like, I just feel it's a good ending in the sense that they like didn't kill her off or things like that we would just typically see in that sort of trope. But it stuck with me a little bit, and like that's a really sad place for anyone to sort of be in. So that was hard. Drawn to Life, what brings these characters up out of the movies and into why we sort of relate to them, why we picked the craft? Who's the character that really sticks out to you and why?
I mean, it has to be Nancy, because I can relate having kind of a rough home life and maybe wanting things to look different. So like on that level, I can relate to her, but I also just find her kind of the most entertaining because, as it's kind of been established, I love deranged women. And so I just think her character is kind of having the most fun at the end of the day. Rewatching it now, it's like I do like the character of Sarah.
Robin Tunney. That and Empire Records, like such an important double feature for me. That's great too. She's got this really somber delivery that works really well. Like there's not a like probably the opposite to the way I speak. There's not a lot of highs and lows in the voice. She doesn't go up really high pitched or go down really low. Really just straight delivery, and I find that really intriguing. Very 90s as well. Very not goth in the sense, but just teenagers that are a bit detached. She's got a detachment in her voice, which I really like. but that doesn't mean she doesn't have a lot of heart. So I think that's an interesting way to play it. I like Sarah probably the most, as I sort of said, Robin Tunney with this, and the Empire Records character with Deb. Like, really interesting character portrayals for the mid-90s of it all. Melissa, I've got a question for you. What is it about the teenage setting that is such a ripe area for horror movies? So, because we get this, we get Scream, we get Carrie, we get all these really iconic horror movies. As a horror expert, what is it about that really? I'm saying it. Take the compliment. What is it about teenagers and horror movies that just seems to go really well together?
I mean, I think there's a few different aspects. I mean, it's the time of your life that you're finding your identity and kind of discovering yourself. And so I think you can really play a lot into that. Because I think at the end of the day, the horror genre is definitely playing into those fears and anxieties that we have as humans. And so there's a lot of anxiety going on during this time period. Your body's changing. There's social aspects going on at school, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I think there's a lot of things you can play up in the horror genre to kind of exploit, or not exploit, that's not really the right word, but like play up into those fears in the horror genre and fantasy too. Because I would say this movie's more horror fantasy. It's not like full-blown horror, but I think it plays really well like into those fear and anxieties as a teenager.
Technically speaking, we got to talk, one, costumes, because otherwise it's not our show, and two, soundtrack. When you messaged me, this soundtrack slaps, I'm like, oh my goodness. When I watched this a few years ago, I added like half of it to Spotify. And then when I'm rewatching it again now, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot how good these are. We'll go soundtrack first. What are some of the tracks that stand out to you?
I mean, I love the cover of How Soon Is Now. Like, yes, please.
Are you a witch in the 90s if I Am the Sun, I Am the Air is not playing behind you?
Fair. And then I love Susie and the Banshees and Portishead. I was just like, that was the kind of stuff I was listening to in high school. I mean, I was in high school in the 90s, but that was definitely this was the type of music I was listening to during this like time period of my life. So like that just really hits for me. But yeah, and also I love that we have Letters to Cleo again. Another through line.
Okay, this is what I was going to mention as well. So I love the Beatles opening the cover of Tomorrow Never Knows. Such a good way to open the film with this clouds behind and this almost hocus pocus, like this font. Love it. But when they are feeling themselves, feeling their power, and they're walking through the school to Dangerous Type by Letters to Cleo, I'm like, here we go. Through lines, it is happening. I like that song. I like that album. That Portishead song, Glory Box, is not on the album. And that, I was like, what the hell? Because when I was looking at the album, and one of the critic ratings was like 1.5 stars for this album, like, get out. Like, these are alt 90s classics happening right now. But Portishead isn't on it. Something about really great songs on the radio in a lot of movies, a lot of times, that never like end up hitting it. I'm thinking like this one. Doesn't Under the Milky Way play on the radio in Donnie Darko? Things like, I would have loved to have seen that be part of the soundtrack. But yeah, this soundtrack goes so hard and I live for it. I'm very much the same. Like anything in like that 90s alt, very much my vibe.
Yes.
The costumes. So yes, it's the goth aesthetic, but what I really like about it as well, it's also like mixes in a bit of that grunge aesthetic. And also when the girls are just wearing like sundresses in like a velvety fabric or in like a silk satiny fabric, just some of the choices of fabrics I was really loving. There's the scene where they're walking down the street and Sarah has her sweater tied around her waist. I'm like, that was a look. That was a moment. Melissa, what are some of the costumes that stand out to you?
Oh yeah, I love like the 90s look of like the t-shirt with like the spaghetti strap like top or dress.
I want that to come back so badly. I want that to come back.
Just do it. Why not? But I also like, again, costumes definitely help with the storytelling, especially in this one, because we see maybe not so much Nancy, but actually I would argue yes, because she kind of even goes more intense like in regards to that goth look. But like somebody like Rochelle, she's wearing a lot of like flowery kind of print, and like she's really well put together towards the beginning of the film. And like as she goes on, like she, you know, she's wearing all black and definitely embraces more of that goth look to her. And then same with like Bonnie, you know, she wore like very oversized things trying to hide, and then that skirt just gets shorter and shorter as we go on. So things like that.
Even things like hair. So like I very much considered just not even washing my hair, because she was just like this for the majority of like the start of the film, very The Ring. But then when, you know, she starting to feel herself and her scars clear up, we get a lot of this. And we get a lot of seeing more of her. So I think you're right. Costumes and styling always tells us our thought process of where our characters are in that point of the film. So yeah, just I really enjoy revisiting this one. And I'm trying to think, this probably Scream, Clueless definitely what gives me like the most 90s aesthetic. But yeah, this for the gothic grunge vibes, I love this. Are there any editing, cinematography, set pieces, anything that really stood out to you?
Okay, that opening right behind us, like it flashes kind of all these images and it's edited pretty cool, but it definitely kind of gave me more of like a TV opening. And I will say some of the aspects of this film, actually, it's weird. It feels a little bit more like a TV movie. I feel like some of it didn't really feel like a full cinematic experience in some ways, where I don't know, it just doesn't have like that grand scale of things. But at the same time, it's not a bad thing per se, because I still really enjoy the movie. So I guess a part of it maybe feels a little bit more intimate in a way, if that makes any sense, what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like some of the production doesn't feel like super, you know, yeah, grand, I guess is the word I want to use. But yeah, that opening sequence, like, I think it's so funny.
It does feel like not low budget, but a lower budget, like a very very teen school movie still, where you don't have like huge effects or huge sceneries, like there's no big party scene or things like that. It's a lot of just, I think that's why you say it's intimate. It's a lot of just the girls, hanging out and in the school at home, places like that. I do love the scene where they are creating their coven, you know, falling on the dagger. I don't think we've talked about that, like drinking the blood. And they're experiencing, when they're talking about nature and all the butterflies come up and around them. That was the other one I nearly had as the background. I couldn't find a great photo, but yeah, the little butterfly shot and just that awe and wonder, I think comes across really well.
Yeah, and another aspect I would say, like particularly with the script, that I think was really well done is they did hire, her name is Pat Devin, and she was an expert witchcraft advisor, and like so she like really made sure that it was like as real to life to like the Wiccan culture. And like I read a little bit up on it, and like people who are in that culture like have said it's fairly realistic. There's obviously little things here and there that are more dramatized for the screen, but like overall they did stay pretty true to those things, which I think that's a benefit to the film.
I agree. It never comes across as mocking. It never comes across as belittling. It only comes across as what these girls believe and how it's enhancing and how it's a part of their life. So I love that you've found that out, because I feel like that feels very true, and what makes it feel a bit more authentic and less, a little less cheesy, a little less corny, that sort of thing. Melissa, is there anything about the craft that we haven't touched on yet? What do you think is the legacy of the film? And I absolutely do not mean that pun, because of course we've got the sequel, which I have not actually seen. So if you've seen that, please talk about it. But this is one of those ones, like we took plug doing Disney. Melissa and I are going to talk about Hocus Pocus. Unnecessary sequels for 1000, please. I don't want to watch it again. I like where it is this point in the 90s. I don't know if it will translate. I know it didn't get great reviews, but what do you think of what was the release date for The Craft? This one?
96. I think it was in May of 96.
So we're coming up nearly 30 years later. What do you think is the enduring legacy of The Craft, and why do you think we chose it today?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately the movie ages fairly well. Like, even though there's maybe some of these like difficult topics that are in the movie, I still think it's very true to today, unfortunately. And also, like, I think it's very, it makes it a very realistic portrayal of the teenage experience, particularly a girl's teenage experience. And I think it definitely is dealing with different things like classism and racism and abuse and suicidal kind of thoughts, all those different things that are very difficult topics, but I feel like it handled it fairly well, considering that it was made back in 1996. And yeah, I mean, I think we chose it today because, I mean, our show is called Film Coven. We had to do a witch episode soon. I mean, I'm sure there'll be more down the road. And again, just the power of women. Like, I mean, I know that's like our plug or like our tagline, but it's also kind of, I would say, for this movie too, is the power of women. And sometimes power could be a little bit too much. So you gotta reel it in sometimes.
I love that wrap up, especially just the saying with power of women, because as I sort of said, this to me is something I've seen like on the cover of the poster first, and those women do look really powerful in their uniforms, all four of them with the lightning background. I think that that promotional shot is really good and does sort of draw you into the film. So I'm really glad we got to talk about this one today. Again, thank you so much for all your support. Follow us on our new channel, our Film Coven. Melissa, you are just doing phenomenal work, amazing work. Tell everyone where they can find us and all the different places.
Yeah, we're all different places now. So we're on YouTube on Film Coven Show, and then we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, we're on Letterboxd. Find us all those places, follow us. We want you to join in on the conversation, and that's the best way to support us, is to subscribe to our channel. So, and really from the bottom of our hearts, so grateful for all the support so far. Like, it really means a lot. We have so much fun doing this, so just really appreciate that. I mean, there's never been a time more relevant today to say, stay magical, everyone.